Hi, thanks for joining me to talk about pain. I wanted to talk today about running shoes for people with flat feet. I don't believe that flat feet in and by themselves are something that will cause pain. It can cause pain, but I've seen a lot of runners with flat feet who have no pain at all. And they're not wearing any orthotics either. So over the years, I've come to realize that some people are running just fine without any kind of extra, special shoe or orthotic or anything like that. So if you are a flat-footed person and you are running and you are not having pain, then likely you will not need a special device or shoe or insert or anything like that to help you. And so the rest of this talk will be about people who do have flat feet and do have pain. Okay, so the first kind of pain that we think about with flat feet is plantar fasciitis or heel spurs or things like Morton's neuromas, things like that. So let's talk about what's going on with these conditions. They are not necessarily due to flat feet. So what would they be due to if they're not from flat feet? Okay, so let's take a look at my skeleton here. And those of you who are listening, I have this as a video on YouTube, so you can watch and see what I'm talking about, but I'll try and explain it as best I can for those of you who are just listening. So when we are running or walking, what we need to do is the knee needs to be able to pass over the foot to some degree in order to absorb and allow us to move forward. So what is often happening is people's calf and soleus muscles, which are the muscles behind in the back, they become very tight. And so they restrict this ability for the knee and body to pass over the foot. So in this case, those forces need to go somewhere. I mean, you're moving forward and your knee is trying to bend forward. And if those muscles are restricting that movement, then that force needs to travel somewhere. And it's either going to travel down into the foot and ankle, or it's going to travel up into the knee or the hip or possibly the SI joint or back. All right, so if you can imagine, if that is tight and we are moving forward, then and you have flat feet, well, flat feet just means that you do not have the ligament structure to hold up your arch very well. So what that means is that the force that's being driven downward is happening more instantaneously and to a higher degree into the bones and joints of the foot and the ankle. And because the foot is flat, the arch does not get to bounce back up or recover from that. So it's constantly being flattened. All right? So this is what's often causing, or one of the causes of plantar fasciitis. Plantar fasciitis occurs in people who don't have flat feet too. So it's not necessarily the foot being flat that's the problem. The problem is really that the calf and soleus complex have become too tight. Why has it become too tight? Well, usually it's because of how we sleep. So when we sleep, if you can think about how you sleep, if you're sleeping on your back, you'll usually have a blanket or cover over your feet that's pointing the toes away from you. That means that your calf and soleus complex are shortening for 6 to 8 hours every night. So if you stretch your calf and soleus every day, that will be undone every night because of how you're sleeping. If you sleep on your stomach, again, your toes will be pointing away from you. And then most people, when they sleep on their sides, are usually pointing their toes away from them too. So that's more of an active contraction rather than a passive positioning brought on by the blankets or the bed or something. So nighttime is usually the reason why the calf and soleus becomes too tight. So what I recommend in my foot pain program and to my patients is something called a dorsal night splint. You can get those on Amazon and start sleeping with one of those. And that will usually correct most plantar fasciitis for most people. Okay, so that would be my first recommendation. And that's usually the reason most of you are watching this is because the pain that you're having with running is usually this plantar fasciitis or foot pain. Okay, or I'm sorry, heel spur pain. And so the tight calf and soleus is one of the reasons that's happening. Okay, so now let's say that you do have flat feet, but you're not convinced that they are not the reason that you are having pain. What experiment could we do to determine whether the flatness of your feet is actually causing your foot, ankle, or other pain? Well, I've developed a taping technique, and again, this is in my foot and ankle program, that not only lifts the flat foot up, but it also, because what I've found is people with chronically flat feet also have collapsing ankles as well. So what my taping technique does is it basically lifts the foot arch and puts the ankle in a correct position to neutralize the flatness of the foot and ankle complex. And then after a few days of keeping your foot taped, you get to see what effect that has on your pain. You can run in this tape, you can, walk in the tape, it doesn't really matter. You can keep it on for a whole week if you want to. But basically what this does, this is my way of testing how much the degree of flatness is contributing to people's pain. What a lot of people do is they'll go to a grocery store or a podiatrist and immediately get a pair of orthotics. Well, there's a lot of differences. We could do a whole nother podcast on orthotics, but I find that most off-the-shelf orthotics and even those that are fitted by physical therapists or podiatrists are not taking into account the lower body's systemic issues that are creating most people's pain in the first place. And I feel that orthotics generally are not precise enough to correct these issues. Now, in many people they are, and that's why you'll see tons of stories of people who say, oh, I just bought these off-the-shelf orthotics and solved all my problems. By all means, that can certainly happen. But I'm talking to the people that have probably already tried that and that's not working. And everyone keeps telling them it's their flat feet. And they may have even spent hundreds or $1,000 on expensive orthotics, and that's not working either. So, and the reason is because often the orthotic is not specific enough to control the joints, which this taping technique solves, but also because whoever cast it for those orthotics hadn't really evaluated the whole system of the person to see if they even needed the orthotics in the first place. And so one of the things that is overlooked is the contribution of the tight calf and soleus to foot and ankle problems, all right, and which we just talked about. Okay, so another reason that you may be having foot and ankle issues is because of the shape of the thigh bone. You may have so not all thigh bones are created the same. Look, here's an image of a whole bunch of thigh bones, and you'll see that the neck of the bone, as it inserts into the hip joint, is different through this whole spectrum of thigh bones. This is showing you a concept called femoral retroversion and anteversion. And depending on the degree of femoral retroversion and anteversion you have, that will also affect the forces traveling into your foot. And so knowledge of that and gaining an education of what to do if you have a retroverted or anteverted femur can play a big role into the forces that are acting into the foot and ankle too. Okay? So have someone assess your femoral anteversion and retroversion. It's not that difficult. But I've found there's not many practitioners who A, test for femoral anteversion and retroversion, and B, understand what to do with that information in terms of solving understanding its role in chronic pain and solving that. So I've created a few videos on that already. And also my hip pain program, home program, also goes into femoral anteversion and retroversion too. Okay, so yes, so foot and ankle problems can even be caused by the shape of the thigh bone and your lack of control of that shape. So these are some ideas if you've been struggling with foot and ankle issues and are not getting the answers, and everyone's been saying, oh, if you got flat feet, that's the reason. Well, that may not actually be the reason. It could be the shape of your thigh bone. It could be the tightness of your calf soleus complex. It could be the flatness of your foot and ankle, but you haven't really tested that precisely to know whether that's actually the issue or not. So there are ways to work through this. And in this video, I can't show you, my whole taping technique and testing for femoral anteversion and how to solve all of the permutations of all of those things. That's what my home programs do. But hopefully this gives you hope that, oh my gosh, maybe it's more of a systemic issue rather than just a flat foot issue. And usually that's the case. Now, the last thing I want to talk about that's causing most foot and ankle issues, a lot of people believe that it's because of how they're running with their flat foot. But if you think about it, how often are you running versus how often are you walking? Most people are walking probably 99.9% more doing walking rather than running. And yet, because they feel their pain during running, they think that the running is the problem. But what if the walking pattern was the thing that was setting them up for failing during running? Because during walking, because we do so much of it, if all of the problems that are setting up our lower body systemically are usually occurring then, and then they're manifested during running because now you're adding more load to those problems. All right? So what's the big deal with walking? What are most people doing wrong? Well, one of the big things that most people are doing wrong is that when they're walking, they're putting their foot out in front of them and having a heel strike. Well, and the body is behind the foot at this point. So what this does is it immediately locks the knee backwards and shuts off a whole bunch of pelvic muscles that control not only the pelvis and back, but also the rotation of the thigh bone and control, therefore, of the tibia and the foot. So what should be happening is that the body should be moving forward with the advancing foot at foot strike, and the knee should be soft at foot strike when that's happening. And what that will do is ensure that all of these structures are controlled appropriately during gait. Doing that will then hopefully shore up all of the biomechanical problems that you have because of the lack of control that you've been having up to this point. So I always tell my runners, because if you've worked with runners for any period of time, most of them are very nervous about changing their running form. I almost never have to change a runner's running form. Instead, I change their walking form. And then that plays out into the running, and that solves their running pain. So I would start with your gait habits, understanding whether you have femoral retroversion or anteversion. Try that dorsal night splint. And if you want to test whether your foot flatness is the actual cause of your pain, then I would get my foot pain program. It's pretty cheap. And try the taping technique for the foot and ankle in there, and to fully unload the tissues on the bottom of your foot appropriately and see if that solves your pain too. All right? So hopefully that gives you an idea of other places to look for your foot and ankle pain, and good luck with that.